Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. With me, as always, Jack Fairchild. Jack, how are you today?
Doing pretty good, Chris.
Well, there's been an awful lot going on since the last show. My goodness, I don't know where to begin, frankly. We could talk about debates. We could talk about the Supreme Court of the United States. We could talk about the Democrats' attack on that institution. We could talk about the fact that they're screaming bloody murder over no justifiable reason. Or we could just ignore all of that and have fun. But I think we're going to be forced to discuss it.
I think so. I don't think there's any way around it.
And the thing that gets my attention here is that I realize some of you have probably seen immeasurable news coverage on this already, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. So maybe we can handle it from a slightly different perspective, yet still get valid points out for people to understand, hopefully. Now, the last show, we talked about the Supreme Court of the United States, and they had a series of very big decisions coming down. You saw that occur Friday of last week toward the end of the term, and we knew these decisions were coming. We were excited about them, and for the most part, they were pretty good decisions. Now, there were some I found perhaps problematic, but as a whole, pretty good decisions. Let's go over a couple of those real quick before we transition into the Trump immunity decision. That's what everybody wants to talk about, but first and foremost, this Chevron decision. Now, people, sometimes when we talk about administrative agencies or the administrative might of the state, their eyes gloss over. But let's just hit where it's supposed to be hit. There's no more dangerous, I think, threat to your liberty than unelected bureaucrats, right? You can't control them. These folks are appointed most of the time, or they're hired by someone who's appointed, and they end up promulgating regulations that have the force of law. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a country like that. I don't want to live where some unelected bureaucrat can tell me how to live, what to do, and if I don't follow his instructions, I can be convicted of a crime. I can be fined significantly. And so years ago, there was a decision back in '84 called the Chevron decision. I won't bore you with the facts. Long story short, the Supreme Court said that agencies are given deferential treatment when it comes to how they interpret vague regulations or vague statutes. What that means is a pinhead, a bureaucrat, can read something, interpret it differently, and apply it and penalize you outside of the normal scheme of the democratic process. Now, this is a republic. We're going to talk about that again later, not a democracy, but we do have a process by which things are supposed to occur. The court did finally reverse Chevron, stripping a lot of this arbitrary power away from these administrative agencies. That's a good win for liberty. We thank God for the court's decision. We think over the long haul, you may see some real benefits as a result of that. I think the first benefit should be that Congress needs to be the one to actually make the laws and quit passing that buck down to agencies.
Amen.
Number two, Congress should have the power when an agency passes a regulation to either repeal it, right, or ignore it as they see fit. Number three, most of those regulations are just impermissible in the first place. So we're happy to see the Supreme Court peeling back layers of federal power because, again, bear in mind, federal power right now is the biggest threat to your liberty. The federal government is out of control. It's abusive. It's got more resources than it knows what to do. If you think otherwise, just look at the way they're proceeding with these prosecutions of various entities, including President Trump, across the United States. What you don't want is an out-of-control federal government, which is what we've got. What this does, it helps peel back that power just a bit. Hopefully the Supreme Court can stick around this 6-3 majority they have going right now for a long, long time and keep peeling back federal power. Very thankful today for Gorsuch. Very thankful today for Alito. Very thankful today for Thomas. Those three guys have stood the ground every single time, have voted conservatively every single time, even though sometimes we lose a Roberts or a Kavanaugh or even a Barrett. They're disappointed in her lately.
Me too, yeah.
We'll discuss that in a future show, but we thank God for those three, at least today, the previous three. Number two, there was a decision dealing with Biden, the administration, and how they were using social media or in trying to influence social media to curtail or censor certain conservative thought that the government found objectionable. This is where the Supreme Court, I think, may have gotten it wrong. You know, you think about the power of the federal government and how they basically have this unique ability now because they touch every aspect of everybody's lives to threaten and to extort and to force people into positions normally those people might not have taken. Well, we know the federal government was used to tell by Biden and his administration to tell Facebook and X or Twitter, whatever the case may be, to stand down or censor some of this objectionable content. And they did. They were sued. As the result of that, the Supreme Court ruled on the side of the government.
This decision made no sense to me.
It only does to the extent the court is always trying to play it safe. The one thing about Roberts is this. Years ago when he was first appointed, you might remember, before the confirmation, I had real concerns about him. Not his intellect. The man's brilliant. Not his ability to be a good counselor. He has all of the tangible abilities to be a great lawyer, a great Supreme Court justice. The problem was you could sense his reluctance to take bold stances. And it kind of fit the old tradition of our presidents appointing milquetoast style Supreme Court justices, while the liberals appoint these warriors to those positions. And our guys say, whoa, let's be tepid and let's be even-minded and tempered. And they're waging culture wars in the Supreme Court, and we always seem to lose when the court sits in that posture. Roberts struck me as one of those people. And now it seems he's a lot more concerned about the legacy of the court. And again, I guess nothing's wrong with that, but I don't think he would be as concerned if it wasn't the Roberts court.
That's fair.
Right? So he's concerned about the legacy more than I think he is sometimes finding the right result. So he's always on half measures, always very careful. No greater example of that than when he refused to reverse or rule Obamacare unconstitutional. That case was dead to rights. There's no federal justification for Obamacare at all. And remember, he was very clever. He tried to create an argument why the taxing authority was utilized when it was clearly a penalty. It had nothing to do with taxation. Clearly a penalty. But that was him. Really clever, really careful. Let's not do too much at one time. We may offend somebody. Half measures. That struck me as this type of case. Maybe one day, maybe they wanted the federal government to do more. Maybe they were hoping a mandate before they could take action. In any event, there was a strong dissenting opinion. I think it was Alito that wrote it, and he dissected the majority's opinion and seemed to point out why it was that the Roberts decision or the Roberts majority was wrong in that situation. Another decision, obstruction charges for January 6th protesters in Washington. Remember, another example of federal prosecutors abusing their power, taking another statute that's supposed to be utilized for business dealings, finding a little vague part of that and trying to apply it to folks that were protesting at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Supreme Court reversed that, said you couldn't do that. Another good decision for law and order in that sense. Here's why. When you have a broad criminal statute, that invites corruption. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. If the statute is too broad or vague, any really clever prosecutor who's so politically inclined can bring the charge and indict somebody pretty easily. You've heard the old saying, haven't you? You can indict a ham sandwich?
Yes.
It's true. It's true. Do you know, nobody really knows how the indictment process works. Do you know how that really works?
Not really, no, being honest.
All right, let's just say you have a prosecutor who has a very vague statute, right? And he goes to a big jury, called a grand jury, and they're sitting in the room. He gets to present evidence and the statute to the grand jury without defense counsel present. He gets to introduce it without hearing the other side of the equation. And of course, this grand jury sitting there gets to vote one way or the other. Do we issue an indictment or do we not? Well, what do you think they do? They're going to listen to the prosecutor and issue the indictment.
Because that's all they hear.
I challenge people all the time. Just because somebody's indicted, it doesn't mean they're guilty. We make that big. I do. I make the mistake all the time.
Everybody does.
I read it in the paper. So-and-so's been indicted. I'm like, guilty. But that's not the case. Anybody can get indicted. So when you have these broad criminal statutes, it invites abuse. So basically, we're happy the Supreme Court was able to curtail that and make it more narrowly defined in its application. The abortion case up there in, was it Oregon?
I think so.
We talked about that. We lost that one as well. Turns out that the Biden administration filed suit up there under EMTALA, long story short, basically saying that the abortion law in that state was too strict and that they could not exercise emergency room discretion in certain circumstances. Supreme Court ruled on behalf of the federal government in that sense. By the way, it was Idaho, not Oregon. It was Oregon where they had the camping ban. Did you see that?
I didn't see that one.
No, this may not seem like a lot to most people, but this is pretty fascinating because what if I told you there was a city in Oregon that implemented a camping ban? In other words, you can't sleep on public property. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get around some of these real problems we have with homelessness. And it's always the liberal cities.
I've noticed that.
Always the Northwest, right? Because they can't manage anything up there because they're run by liberal lunatics. But in this particular area, there was a law passed and says, listen, we can't have you out here sleeping on public property. You got to find somewhere else to go. It was challenged. Now, a common sense approach would say, of course, a city can outlaw that if they wish. Oh, no, because there's organizations out there that say that housing is a constitutional right and that to criminalize them sleeping on a public property violates the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The Supreme Court made it clear that does not. It is not the case. It is not cruel and unusual punishment the way the Ninth Circuit ruled that it was. And they basically argued, the Supreme Court did, they said, look, the Supreme Court is not here to make law for every city in this country when it comes to homelessness.
Yeah. Another
good decision. We'll take it. So now back to the one that everyone's talking about. Immunity. I've read the decision. I don't understand all the consternation just yet. And I'll tell you why I say just yet. Because if you read it in a vacuum, the way the liberal press wants to read it, they make it sound like the Supreme Court took this unprecedented leap into the abyss and that they're ending democracy, as we tell it, and that everybody is dangerous and nasty and horrible, and this 6-3 majority are lunatics. Well, I'm going to tell you about the 6-3 majority. You may disagree with their result here. These are brilliant people. And I assure you that the like-mindedness of a Thomas and a Alito and a Gorsuch, they're just as concerned about executive power being too broad as anybody else is in this country. So for them to join this decision tells me that the decision was a sound decision legally, and that the left seems to be hyperventilating over something that probably will never occur. Now let's look at the decision just for a second so we can all understand it. And it was based in large part, not solely, but in large part on the separation of powers. That's a really important distinction in this country. We have a separation of powers so that no one branch can become too powerful. Separation exists so they will exert force and ambition against one and the other, and to keep them all kind of balanced, if you will. Now, the liberals look at this decision and they say, oh, the balance is all thrown off now. They've given all the power to the president. Not exactly. What the court did, it gave power to the president, or immunity to the president, when he's exercising his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution. What is Article 2? That's the article that defines the powers of the presidency. So as long as any president is exercising authority within the powers of the Constitution, it's not a long list. You can look it up if you want to. Pardons and all this stuff. You've seen it. As long as he's exercising authority there, he has immunity.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It does, and here's why. Because if you do not grant the immunity as he's exercising core constitutional powers, and it stands to reason Congress could outlaw one of those core constitutional powers, or at the very least, outlaw a predicate step to enforce one and try to avoid the constitutional question and just say it's criminal. Well, of course, says you can't do that because of separation of powers. You got to respect the division of authority here. But it went on to say that as long as the president exercises core, that is, of those certain defined powers, he has immunity. But if he exercises outside of that authority, there's no immunity, except presumed. Oh, the liberals go crazy over the word presumed immunity. In the law, that happens all the time. Certain cases are presumed. I'm going to give you an example about that, Jack. If you're traveling down the road on a highway and there's a car up ahead of you, and that car, for whatever reason, slams on brakes. If that car, for whatever reason, is going a little bit too slowly, but not under the minimum speed limit, if something happens to that car where its motor goes out, and then you hit the car from behind, it's almost implied that you're at fault.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's kind of what they're saying here. It's presumed that you're at fault. That doesn't mean you are. You could always disprove it. You can always point out that he went from 0 to 60 in 1 second with a slamming on brakes for no reason whatsoever. There's ways to attack the presumption of liability, as there will be here as well. And this is where it gets interesting. Now the court has said, look, here are the parameters of immunity. And they pointed out with great pain, this isn't simply about Trump. Any president, any position, any party. They said it a couple of times in the decision. They saw this is going to be a really sensitive political issue. And so they said, look, when he's acting in a core function, immune, if he's acting outside of those official core functions, there's a presumption. However, maybe not. Maybe not. Now, Supreme Courts do this all the time. They set parameters. Now we have a parameter. We have the rules of the ball game, so to speak, right? Now they've sent it back down to the trial court to apply the rules of the ball game and adjust it to these set of facts. This is not alarming. This is the way court systems work. I guess they thought the Supreme Court was supposed to try this case for them. The Supreme Court is not there to try cases. This is an appellate court. It reads the record from a previous court, the trial court. Then it applies the law the way it's supposed to be applied. The court here said, look, here are the new rules. Look at it again. Okay? That's all it was.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And there are a couple of things here that I think are very telling when it comes to the way that the left is handling this. First off, they know one thing, and that's fear. So they're going to play on people's ignorance. They're going to play on the fear side of things and continue to try to use different examples that are completely absurd. Stuff like, well, now he can just assassinate the Biden family if Trump gets back in power. Things like that are being utilized just because they understand that they can create fear. But they also, Chris, and I think this is another point that needs to be made, they're also so used to having the liberal side. And what they did do was create new laws from the bench. We saw that for years. And I think now that they're getting a taste of good old true conservative constitutional rulings, right? They don't get it.
But this isn't activism. Theirs was activism.
Exactly.
This is legitimate. Now here's the difference. You use the example of the president murdering a rival or whatever the case may be. SEAL Team 6 breaks into somebody's place and shoots them.
Yeah.
And Sotomayor, she knows better than this. Look, I don't like her politics or her legal analysis. She's brilliant.
Yeah.
She's genius. She knows better than this, and here's why she should know better. First of all, if you look at Article 2 of the Constitution, I don't see any power in there for the president to assassinate a rival, do you?
No.
So I think we would all argue that the assassination of a rival is not a core political function subject to immunity, right? Number two, even if it's implied somewhere in this penumbra of authority, because there's express powers and there are implied powers, I haven't seen any argument anywhere historically there's an implied power of the president to assassinate a political rival.
No.
And so even if you argue that somehow there was a presumed immunity there, once you analyze it and break it down, you recognize there would not be immunity for that. Wouldn't be immunity to that. And the court gave us rules for the trial courts to apply, and I'm fairly certain, to call me crazy, I'm pretty sure any trial court in the country applying these same rules with an assassination attempt where it was proven it was directly ordered by the president of a political rival is going to indict. It's going to find that president guilty, or somebody, a jury is going to find the president guilty of this act. And then I guess if you appeal to the Supreme Court, what are they going to do? No, you're right. Sotomayor is right. No, they're not. She knows better than that. It's fear-mongering.
Exactly.
It's fear-mongering. Now, it sounds good. I love the way she wrote it. I'll read that in a second. But it's just fear-mongering. So you have this, according to Roberts, there's an immunity for criminal prosecution within the outer limit of his official responsibility. Again, it's vague, but it's enforceable. You know, our constitutionally, I heard somebody say earlier, is majestically vague. I don't know what majestically vague really means, but I think it makes sense. And here's why. This is going to shock you liberals to death. I know you want a very specific constitution that talks about everything imaginable. The thing would be 700 pages long. You can't provide every caveat, every and or an exception to everything you think is right or wrong in a founding document, especially one that's only here primarily to make sure the federal government doesn't have too much power. So it's one of the shortest constitutions in the world. Thank God for that. You know, the Soviets have a longer constitution than we do.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they have more rights. I bet North Korea has a longer constitution than we do, but I assure you they don't have more rights. What we do have here is a magical document that is somewhat vague, but thank God for that, because where it is clear, like the Second Amendment, that's pretty clear. But you claim that's vague. Leave it to a liberal, right? Leave it to a liberal. They'll create powers that don't exist, like the assassination attempt, but where it specifically spells out a right, you ignore that language altogether. I'm not falling for it.
Or they create a radical, out-of-control Supreme Court. Why, when one that's actually based in the Constitution, while they ignored a true radical extreme Supreme Court for years when it was benefiting them.
Well, I'm going to give you an example of how the three liberal justices view the country as a whole now. And when they write this very poisonous style of dissent, which I found amusing, it was well written, it was just amusing. And then in the same breath, in the same week, when Oregon attempted to make sure that the homeless, could not just dominate public parks, which is what they were doing. They weren't saying you couldn't find a home. They were saying you just can't do it right here. Those three, with Sotomayor leading the charge, they seem to believe that housing is a constitutional right. Now let that sink in. Housing, a constitutional right. Now I've read the Constitution. There's no mention of housing in the Constitution.
No.
So by virtue of that, it's not a constitutional right. But number two, if I drill down and look at the traditions and the norms of this country since its inception, at no point has anyone argued reasonably that there's a constitutional right to housing. But they're trying to stick one in the document here. That's how they see the world. They don't like it, so they're going to amend it. Even though there's an amendment process, they don't follow that. They want to rewrite it, like you said. And so put this constitutional right to housing in the document. What does that look like economically speaking? Consider, what if every American citizen now claimed a constitutional right to housing? Who pays for that?
That's the question.
Because I can't think of any other constitutional right. Think about my right to speech. No one has to pay for it.
Nope.
My right to own a gun. No one has to pay for it.
Just you.
My right to worship. No one has to pay for it. But those are considerable natural rights. And the founders realized the kind of rights that we exercise are not ones contingent upon somebody else paying for it or rendering a service being forced to. That's antithetical of liberty. They want the government to pay for it. Who pays for that? We're already $34 trillion in debt with no end in sight, and these idiots want to make a constitutional right to housing. It sounds great in theory. I love the thought process, but in the real world, with our Constitution, it's not approachable or practical.
No.
But think about it. They'll write it in there. They'll write it in there, and they say that's reasonable. But then Roberts writes an opinion, being really reasonable, arguing that, look, there are core powers where there's immunity, and they say that's just unbelievable. They're not reading the document. They've never read the document.
No.
They don't want to read the document. Here's why. Because the document limits their authority. The reason liberals hate they say they love the Constitution. No, you don't. No, you do not. You hate that document because what it does is it takes your authority, the authority of the federal government, and it says you cannot. You shall not. You hate being controlled. You know you hate rules. You know you hate that Constitution. You say you love it, but you're trying to rewrite it every day, right? And here we hear this argument that somehow the Supreme Court has single-handedly reversed democracy into democracy. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. But more importantly, it's not a democracy. It's a republic. Do people understand that?
No, not at all.
You know the difference, right? You wackos out there, you know the difference. A democracy, there are no rights. You know that, right? Hey, think about it. Power of government controlled solely by the majority vote. So if 51% of the country decided to take your property, 51% of the country decided to throw you in jail, 51% of the country decided to do X, Y, and Z. Under a democracy, that would be the rule of law.
Yep.
You want to live that way? I don't think it's right. I don't think it's safe for
I don't think
anybody.
they do.
I don't think they understand it. They think this democracy concept is valid and wonderful. It's not. Let's not kid ourselves. Most Americans really aren't terribly concerned about paying attention to public affairs.
Nope.
Most don't know up from down when it comes to, when I say most Democrats especially is what I'm talking about. Most Democrats cannot tell you one thing about how this government is supposed to function, but they believe they can vote themselves pay raises, they can vote themselves free cell phones, they can vote themselves X, Y, and Z, they can take away your property. I guess you'd think you could vote away churches if you were so inclined. Under a democracy, you could.
Yep.
We're not a democracy. We have core foundational rights. Some of them you can't touch no matter how many people you bring to bear. 99% of your vote can't take away my right to speak. At least not yet. At least not until they get control of the Supreme Court again and actually begin to rewrite the First Amendment.
Yeah, it's coming.
Based on their concepts of democracy. And while I'm venting about that, and I've said this twice before on this show and it fires me up, democracy. Think of a more anti-democratic institution than that Supreme Court they used for 60 years to dominate this country.
Mm-hmm. But they remain silent.
Was Roe versus Wade based on democracy?
Nope.
any of your cases that you love so much, I want to know which one was based on democracy, because you had 9 unelected Supreme Court justices dictating the law of the land from Washington, D.C. That's not democracy. That's an oligarchy.
But they agreed with the decision, so therefore it was different.
That's the difference. As long as they like the outcome, you know what? It's democracy. And the thing that they dislike the outcome, and it's tyranny. That's liberalism writ large. A lot of ignorance, a lot of puffery, a lot of talk, but no real practical solutions. For goodness sakes, your cities are on fire. Your inner cities are on fire because of your policies. Defund the police, indeed. How's that working out in Portland, Oregon right now?
Oh,
Give me a break. There's nothing you Democrats touch that doesn't burn to the ground eventually. And then you try to find an excuse and blame conservatives for it. And we're sitting here telling you for 10,000 years of human existence, certain things exist for a reason. And if you'll follow that path, you'll find some degree of prosperity. But when you abolish the police, when you legalize, I know libertarians going to get mad at me about this. Have you seen the drug legalization effort up there in the Northwest?
I've seen some of it.
They didn't just legalize marijuana. Some of these folks legalized everything.
Everything.
And you say to yourself, as a libertarian-minded person, which I kind of am, people should be able to do, have you seen the results of this?
I can only imagine, but no, I've not seen it.
Oh, homelessness, mental illness, despair, right?
Crime, I'm sure.
Now, look, here's the thing. If there was a Faustian bargain here, maybe we can talk about this. All right? Here's the deal then. If you're in Portland, Oregon, here's the deal. We're going to legalize drugs for everybody. But conversely, no public benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think through it. Would you be for something like that?
Legalized drug, but no public benefits.
No, listen. If you touch a drug,
no public.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No welfare. No,
I think that's fair. Choices have consequences, so therefore I support this, because again, if you're going to make that choice, if you're going to make that decision, there's your consequence.
Liberals don't see it that way. Liberals would argue that, look, it's their life, let them live it, and if they make mistakes, you have to pay for it. And if you don't pay for it, you're a terrible human being. Now, listen, I don't want to get into the drug legalization debate. There are pros and cons there. I give, because I'm a really liberty-minded individual. You know this.
Yes.
And I want people to live and let live, but at the same time, you can't live and then expect me to pay for your mistakes. Speaking of that, I'm digressing. We got to go to our sponsor here in a second. I had a bill a few years ago. Hold on. I had a bill a few years ago. And this really infuriated the left. Because what I was going to do is I was going to attach a nicotine test to folks applying for Medicaid.
I remember that bill.
Right? And if you think about it rationally, I'm not saying you can't smoke. Smoke all you want. I'm just saying if you smoke, you can't be on Medicaid. And you say, well, that violates my civil liberties. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because you don't have a right to be on Medicaid.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to smoke necessarily.
Nope.
Right? It's right? It works together. But if you do, and you drive up the cost for everybody, which is what happens, why should you be allowed to do that? Right? Well, I did the bill just to see kind of how they would react. And the liberals in Jackson went berserk, and they came to see me. They couldn't figure out what they hated more, right? Tobacco or losing Medicaid, because they hate tobacco. And I was giving them that option. I was saying, I was trying to get people off, and they liked that. But if you're smoking, and you drive up the cost of Medicaid, and it does tremendously, the science shows that it does, why should the taxpayers be forced to pay for that accelerated or that increased amount of coverage?
They shouldn't.
So here's what the bill did. It said, listen, you go take a nicotine test, you test positive for it, you go to a tobacco cessation program, you have, 90 days to get off of it. Then you test it again. So now you're giving them a second chance. You can even remain on Medicaid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I only did this to just see the limits of liberal lunacy, and we found it. But can you tell me a logical fallacy behind that bill?
Well, Chris, you obviously hated democracy.
I guess so. No, that's the thing. That's the argument, right?
Yeah.
Because I disagree with them.
There's no argument against it, so therefore they go to some hyperbole like you hate democracy. That is their argument.
I've been called everything but a Baptist for 20 years.
That's fair.
I have no idea what's next.
Chris, you are a Baptist, correct?
Well, theoretically, but
then I'm going to call you a Baptist.
What are they going to say about? What are they going to say about that? What are they going to say about that?
Well, you're anti every other denomination.
You can't win in this business. You can't win. There's always going to be an attack.
Oh, absolutely.
One more example. If Jesus himself were to run for office, let's just say that Jesus were to primary Lindsey Graham.
Is it?
Okay. And the establishment would clearly back Lindsey Graham.
Oh, absolutely.
And so what are the hit pieces on Jesus, right? Right? He turned water into wine. Is that a problem? And then pro-alcohol?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Wait a second. What's the other political attack they would make? He hangs around with really bad people.
Yep.
We know him by the company he keeps. They use that one against me, by the way.
I remember.
The company he keeps. Another one. So Jesus walked on water. Remember that? He walked on water. He obviously can't swim. Well, really can't swim.
Yep.
Why would we elect a senator that can't swim?
That's fair.
Bottom line here is, no matter what you do in politics, some establishment hack job's going to attack you. And unfortunately, about 40% of the population's got their head buried, and they're going to believe whatever ad they see. So even the good Lord himself would have a hard time against Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
Yep.
Anyway, that's all hyperbole, just to get you liberals and establishment folks.
But they like hyperbole, so we just give them a little bit.
Anyway, let's thank our sponsors, Jack. They're going to be leaving us after this.
Well, this year has come with a lot of uncertainties. Will red-hot inflation continue? Will interest rates continue to soar? How can the Fed promise a soft landing when all signs point to another serious recession? If the beginning of this year has shown us one thing, inflation is not slowing down, and the Fed is completely incapable of fixing these issues. Like millions of other Americans, I have found myself asking, how am I going to protect myself and my family? That's why we at the Midnight Ride Network spoke to the folks at Genesis Gold Group, our new platform partner for the Midnight Ride. They walked me through how I can protect my savings with real physical gold and silver. Genesis makes it easy to convert your 401k or your IRA into a retirement account backed by precious metals like gold and silver. Genesis Gold Group has decades of experience helping folks just like you preserve your hard-earned savings, and the service provided to their clients is truly one of a kind. Call Genesis Gold today at 800-200-GOLD for a no-commitment, informative consultation with one of their experts to find out if Genesis can be a fit for you. That's 800-200-4653 or visit them at midnightridegold.com. And when it comes to protecting you and your family's future, I'm excited to share with you another one of the Midnight Ride's new sponsors, Prepper Beef. Prepper Beef offers a range of freeze-dried beef and freezer boxes with steaks and roast made from high-quality, all-American cattle. These products are made to last for up to 20 years, ensuring you have access to premium beef for decades to come. By supporting Prepper Beef, you're not just buying beef, you're supporting American ranchers, values, and your family. Join us in our mission to eat well today and eat well tomorrow. Visit midnightridebeef.com and stock up for your future today.
All right, good job. I think we would love for you all to support those sponsors if you can. It helps us, helps this show, and they've been very, very good to us. Biden, we can't. After the debate the other night,
Yeah.
and you all have already seen a lot of coverage on the debate, so we're not going to beat a dead horse, so to speak. It is sufficient to say that he looked really bad.
Yeah.
He looked like the Joe Biden we knew was there. And all the vitamins and prep work and massage treatments, whatever he took before the
B12 shots.
Caffeine. It just didn't work the way they anticipated. And here's the thing: you have this to show you how bad it really is. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, because part of me actually feels for him just a bit. The human side of me feels for him just a bit. The human side. And I know there are some conservatives out there that are like, the hell with him. And that's okay too. But the human side is like, I'm seeing this 80-plus-year-old guy up there just, destroying his legacy, whatever folks left of it. Proving to the entire country that he's incapable, unable to be president. How bad was it? Well, imagine that you're going to be watched by 50 million people. Imagine it's your first chance to prove to them that you're not the old man that we all say you are. Imagine going to Camp David and having the best debate preppers in the world come to see you and literally sit with you for days on end, preparing you for this one pivotal moment in your political life. Imagine, because it all happened, they threw everything they could to help him. And he stood there and he was gone.
Yeah.
Now, that's after all that debate. That's after all that prep. That's after all the pressure and the understanding that you must indeed perform. And he failed as miserably as a person can fail. But we seem to think he can handle an international crisis with only moments to prepare, with only moments to understand if something really were to happen. He's proven that he can't. He's incapable. He has no business being anywhere near the White House. He has no business walking my dog across the street. Don't kid yourself. If you're in a major metropolitan area and he has a dog walking business, you would not let him walk your dog.
No.
But he can be the most powerful man in the free world. Come on, Democrats, you've all lost your collective minds. You saw this coming. You knew it was coming. You did nothing about it because, A, you're paralyzed, because you're the same type of suck-ups in your party that we have in our party. You were more concerned about offending the power than you were doing the right thing. You knew he was incapable. You knew he couldn't handle the job, and you sit there and let it happen. Now, I don't feel sorry for the Democrats. They did this to themselves. I feel sorry for the old man that they are abusing. Yeah, just a bit. He's dead wrong, terrible president. But I feel sorry for the Democrats. And now that the whole world has seen it, and there's nowhere else to hide, now there's a few of them scrambling for the exit, a few trying to figure out what to do. But you know what? Most, the polling shows, are still stubbornly holding on to this man because they still fear this system that we have in this country. And here's the system. By the time you get to be president, you have so many suck-ups attached to you. You've got so many people that depend on you for jobs and paychecks and benefits and favors. You don't dare buck him, even though you know he's a danger to this country's security. You still will prop him up. So here we are now where this guy has no business running, and we hear all this talk about how they're going to do something at the convention. No, you're not. No, you're not, because you're afraid to. You don't have enough sense to, first of all, practically and logistically. But secondly, you're afraid to take action because you may upset the hand that feeds you. So here's what they do. We see this terrible performance, and we shake our heads and we say, see, told you so. And their excuse, he had a cold.
I saw that.
What's worse? Taking this old guy and putting him out there and making a fool of him and you, but then you think the American people are just that stupid? Well, nothing to see here. He has some sinus congestion. Well, Jack, you have sinus congestion
right now.
Right now, and I think you could out-debate Joe Biden. That's debatable.
Easily. No, it's not debatable.
It may happen. It may not. Only one way to know. We got to get him here for a show.
Hey, I'm in favor of that. I like my odds against Sleepy Joe.
All the things they could say. I mean, give us 1,000 reasons. Say it was past his bedtime at 7:30.
It was.
Well, they have told us now that he has peak operating powers. Just like my cell phone. It has peak operating powers about between 10 and 4. And outside of that, there's no battery left. His battery power runs out about 4:30 in the afternoon. Well, if you know the battery power runs out, maybe you schedule a debate for a lunchtime dynamic.
Yeah.
You don't wait till late, because he took a butt kick into that debate.
Yeah, he did.
And Trump looked presidential. He looked firm. He looked like he knew what he was talking about. Now, here's the thing about American voters. If you go back to that Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960, Nixon had all the accolades and the gravitas, all the office power, if you will. And then he stands there next to this younger candidate in 1960, where television was just now kind of coming this really cool thing, right?
Yeah.
We're all getting to watch these debates for the first time. And we got to see what we think the president's supposed to look like. And Kennedy dominates the debate. Lincoln. Maybe mine's about as old as Lincoln, but we're from Lincoln. Nixon, he, you might remember he was sweating. Mm-hmm. He did not look comfortable in front of the camera.
He forgot to shave or something, I think, as they've said. Yeah.
That's my big dilemma here. Just like, thanks for pointing that out. But he just didn't look as sharp as Kennedy. Now, the American people, we've watched a lot of TV shows over the years, and we like to envision what we think a president should look like. In my mind, he looks like Mitt Romney, but sounds like Ronald Reagan.
Fair.
Yeah. Not, Mitt Romney looks like Mitt Romney, but he sounds like Bernie Sanders. You never know what you're going to get, right? So we have this actor portrayal of a president. It's always a handsome, robust, articulate person, kind of like Kennedy would be, kind of like Reagan was, right?
Yeah.
And no matter how much we dislike President Obama, great speaker, great orator. I mean, people attack him and say he wasn't. Come on.
He had charisma.
I didn't agree with a word he said, but I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I knew the first time that guy spoke, he was going to be president.
Chris, I remember, because you and I were hosting talk radio back in that day. You came on. It was at the Democrat National Convention. I think he was still just a state senator at the time. You came on and said, this guy's dangerous. You told everybody.
That's your president. Mm-hmm. And look, it wasn't anything he was saying because he's full of gibberish, but it's beautiful.
Well, you accurately asked the question, why would they put a state senator on this big of a national stage unless they have him circled? And sadly, you were correct.
There's no doubt about it. He, and there have been other instances where you have these, state senators that do well and are asked to speak at that stage. You may not realize this. There's a ton of speakers. Mm-hmm. You have to understand, any one of those conventions, there are dozens and dozens.
Yes.
They speak all day, every day. So you have everybody from state senators to city councilmen. Mm-hmm. There's something different about this guy. It wasn't that he was a state senator. I wasn't saying that. I was saying there's something magic here. And what do I base that on? Well, you can almost sense the Democrats looking for that style of a candidate. You could almost sense him contrasting with older candidates of the day. He had a great style of delivery. So Americans have grown accustomed to watching TV and viewing presidents in a certain light. We've grown accustomed to seeing presidents perform in a certain way. I mean, goodness gracious. Biden didn't do any of that.
No.
You see the problem?
Yeah. He at one point said that we have defeated Medicaid.
Well, technically he's right because he's correct because it's broke.
That's fair. They have defeated it. He was just being honest.
It's the only honest thing he said during the debate. You know what else he's defeated? Medicare, Medicaid. He's defeated the budget a few times. He's defeated common sense.
Border security, he's defeated that
as well. He's defeated a lot of cool things, but clearly he didn't mean to say that because that's a cornerstone of his campaign. He was just completely off balance. And here's something else you'll learn about people who are off balance. Teleprompters serve a magical purpose for even the inept. Mm-hmm. Even the inept. A good speechwriter. Have you ever seen a speaker speak and he's got a panel here that's clear and a panel here that's clear? It's not clear to him. It's clear to you. I heard somebody say, well, that's bullet protection. No, that's a teleprompter. Mm-hmm. And what he's saying is, as he's looking around, like he's looking at the audience, he's reading these pre-programmed remarks off teleprompter. A good speechwriter can make Joe Biden look good. But when you take that teleprompter down and he has to think the way normal, rational, average Americans think, he can't do it. Yep. So all that to say, that's a lot of words. Just to say that he doesn't look presidential, he doesn't act presidential. He's gone from being a president to a caricature of just an older man who has no business serving. The Democrats did this to themselves. Let them fix it if they can. I don't think they can.
Chris, there's an enhanced push now to get Democrats are really saying out loud that they need to replace Biden off of the ballot, that they need to come up with another solution. I don't know how they can. Of course, the name that they float most commonly is Gavin Newsom out of California. His policies are terrible. You put him up there, I don't know that that's a win for him.
Blow your mind. They polled Democrats on the next possible person they would like to have other than Biden. You know who led that polling?
Harris?
Yes.
That doesn't surprise me. It's shocking, but I don't have I don't have a high opinion of what Democrats think. Harris, I guess to them, makes the most logical sense because she's already on that stage, despite the fact she's as bad as Biden, except for it's not because she's slipping because of age, it's because she's just not good enough.
Well, she's not very bright.
No.
And they'll say, they'll argue, well, he's just being misogynist. No, I'm not. I've watched her. And I'll give credit where credit's due. There are a lot of bright people out there. There are a lot of bright Democrats. I just disagree with them. Harris, I don't know what she believes because she's always laughing at very inopportune times. She can't seem to deliver a cognitive speech unless she has a teleprompter as well.
Yeah.
That's not who I want leading the free world.
No.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Now, I will say this, Democrats, not only did you try to clean this up by saying he had a cold, it was the next day he did deliver a 4-minute response. He spoke for 4 whole minutes.
It was solid 4 minutes.
He had some extra special Jell-O that night. Right? 4 whole minutes he spoke using a teleprompter. But what was crazy is now they have bronzer on him. Did you see it?
I did, because I saw the criticism about him being orange.
We've heard all this criticism about Trump all these years because of the bronzer he used. And I'd be doggone. They're trying to make Biden look live. And so they put bronzer. Oh, have you seen that?
I did.
How far are you willing to go to keep this man in office?
You have no clue.
There's already some, and I don't believe this for a second. I've told you before, I don't do conspiracy theories. There's already some speculation on, you hear on the social media side that maybe the real Joe Biden's already passed away. Have you heard this?
Oh, yeah. I referenced it a couple of weeks ago as a joke to you, and you were like, we don't even deflect that.
Here's what's crazy. Now, again, let's just say it's, there's an 18-year-old kid out there somewhere writing this, and conservatives get all up in arms.
Yep.
And they have these pictures that show all these things that supposedly prove the real Joe Biden. Well, if this is an actor, he's failing miserably.
He's a terrible actor.
You would think if you have an actor that's taken the place of a fallen president, he would at least be, I don't know, presidential. Let's find the dumbest actor in the country.
It's like if you go back to the Bush era, if they had replaced George Bush with the Will Ferrell version of George Bush, that's basically what you'd be doing if this was the director of Biden.
Don't you kid yourself one bit. In the modern America political climate, Will Ferrell would be president in a heartbeat.
You're not saying he wouldn't.
All you need is some celebrity, make people laugh a little bit. He'll have 51% overnight. It's like a few years ago, they were pushing The Rock to be president.
They still are. There's still a fight from the political parties on which one he might decide to go with. The Republicans and Democrats both are still trying to recruit him.
Well, think about that, though. In a pure democracy, those are the people that will be making your decisions. Voters that think The Rock would be a good president.
That's right.
What do we know about The Rock? When he was a wrestler, he's tough, right? Anyway, you see my point.
He's a good talker.
How dangerous democracy could be. So Democrats, you've done it all now. You've tried hyperbole. You've tried fear-mongering. You've tried the cold excuse. Now you're putting bronzer on this guy. I'm just trying to figure out what might be next.
I mean, it's really interesting, Chris, because, there's so much. We're in an unprecedented time because you look at the fact that you have a candidate that performed as poorly as he did. The fact that they had this debate before the conventions. Chris, have we had presidential debates before the national conventions before, or is this the first time they've done that?
Man, that's a great question. It's probably happened. But I'm not going to guess and say it has. I'm going to say that somebody committed political malpractice on the Biden side of the equation. And I think Trump's team must have been just absolutely jubilant after it. Now, we're getting close to wrapping up. So much we've discussed, and we've had a good time today. And it's one of these days somebody's going to piece together 3 seconds of this show or 4 seconds of this show, and they're going to use it to slap you and me around if you don't.
Oh, they're saving clips here or there. They're out of context for sure.
But remember, watch the whole thing, America.
They won't.
All right, before we wrap up, I want to point out a couple of things because I did see a great quote from Biden after he failed miserably in front of the country. Because look, he has the best the Democrats have to offer around him, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you fix this? You create a dynamic. And I think Biden, I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, I may not be the man I used to be. I might not be as young as I once was. I might not communicate the way I once did, but I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. I said, that's pretty good. That's not a bad spin. That doesn't fix it, but he's basically taken his biggest weakness, that is that he is old, and he's trying to spin it now into a strength. And at the same time, kind of punch at his adversary a little bit. Would say, I may be old, but I know right from wrong. Well, that does presume a standard that's objective. You can't just say you know right from wrong and you be the sole judge of right from wrong. I'll give you some examples. So he says he's a good Catholic, and Catholics know right from wrong. You take, for example, the idea that unborn life is sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Does Joe Biden know right from wrong when it comes to unborn life?
He doesn't appear to.
It seems that he's forgotten that some of this is objective. How about the laws which basically set the standard in this country for right or wrong? I don't know, like illegal immigration. Does he know right from wrong when it comes to illegal immigration?
Doesn't appear to.
Because we have laws he's not enforcing. It seems he doesn't know right from wrong when it comes to that. What about the right from wrong when he forgave student loan debt, even though he didn't have the authority?
No,
I'm still not sure where his right from wrong is. Why don't you get a chance, when you get a chance, just Google Joe Biden lies. And you'll see a long list of those. And I can't claim he knows right from wrong when he spent his entire career lying. Now, I get it. Politicians do that all the time. We don't expect perfect politicians. No politician is perfect. I get that. If there's a long pattern, though, of deception, how can he claim he knows right from wrong? He said in 2008 that a helicopter he was riding in was forced down near Osama bin Laden's lair. Remember that?
I do.
It was a sandstorm. It made it sound like he was taking RPG fire. It was the weather that forced him to land. Is that right or wrong?
That's wrong.
He once claimed to be a coal miner, didn't he, from a family of coal miners?
I think so.
He stole that from a British politician. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, that was plagiarism. Pretty wrong.
In 2007, he said he was shot at in Iraq. He was in the green zone, and a mortar landed like 3 football fields away. Is that right or wrong?
Wrong.
In 93, he said he called Milosevic a, quote, damn war criminal to his face in Sarajevo. The aides in the meeting said, no, he didn't. That right or wrong?
That's wrong.
He said he was a civil rights leader participating in sit-ins. It was proven that he didn't. Is that right or wrong?
Wrong.
He said he criticized to President George W. Bush's face. This is back when he could talk.
Mm-hmm.
He criticized him during meetings, after long meetings. They asked the Bush administration about it, and the quote was, George Bush would never sit in a long meeting with Joe Biden. He said his Delaware house caught fire, almost killing his wife and his dog and his cat, and almost melting his Corvette. Turns out it was a kitchen fire. If that counts as a fire, my house has almost burned down multiple times because my son is out of control in the kitchen. I mean, we've had smoke, microwaves explode, everything occur. That's not a house fire, Joe. Is that right?
That's wrong.
Or wrong? Look, a whole career of exaggerations, a whole career of ignoring the law, a whole career of saying outrageous things. He doesn't seem to know right from wrong.
Well, even a more current example, during the debate the other night, he claimed that he is the only president in history to never lose the life of of anyone in the military during his time. That's a lie, because he has lost military life.
Well, here's the thing. Everybody lies. Every politician lies. I get that. But when you take the high mantle like he has, and you say you know right from wrong, you better be prepared to answer these questions, because it's a lifetime spent of really not knowing right from wrong. I'm not suggesting he's an evil guy. I'm suggesting that if you're going to be the moral superior to Donald Trump, you better act like it and be that person, and he has not been under any circumstances. So there you have it. Debt's out of control. Country's in shambles, it appears. Everybody's unhappy. We're about to fight each other in the streets, it looks like. And the best the Democrats can offer us is Joe Biden.
Oof.
Hey, I'm going to wrap up with this. There's a reason for that. They're as guilty as we are when it comes to propping up the old establishment.
Yep.
Joe Biden is a creature of the establishment. He is a creature of Washington, D.C. You had better candidates. You had better candidates 4 years ago, but you wouldn't dare upset the establishment apple cart because you realize, all of you, you've kissed too many butts, you've sold too many souls, you have too many favors you need, and the establishment to this day still rules this country on both sides of the equation, and that's the problem. Maybe Trump can finally end that. Maybe at the very least he brings it all crashing down, and we see the establishment for who they've always been. Self-serving, uncaring, selfish, undisciplined, ambitious, crude, rude, egoist that care nothing about this country, just about making themselves rich at our expense. Both sides are guilty, and we're here to point it out. This is Chris McDaniel's America. Jack, thank you for being here as always.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll see you next time.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.